All right, it's time for the next panel session, and I'm just going to have the panel flashed up on screen as well, so you can see who's coming up and where they will be sitting down. I will also introduce our panelists. So our moderator is Arvind Mathur, Chief Information Officer, AMEA Kellogg Company. We invite the panelists to sit in the order that they appear on the screen as well. On the panel, we also have Siew, Choo, Managing Director, Group Head of Big Data, AI, and Consumer Banking Technology, DBS Bank. Abhishek Singh, who's the Chief Digital Officer, RGE Group. Celine, Cotonnec, who is the Chief Data Innovation Officer, Bank of Singapore. Elaine Chan, Regional Vice President, Sales, ASEAN and Korea of Denodo. And Joe Lee, Vice President, Asia Pacific and Japan of Tiger Graph. Would you please welcome the panel with a round of applause, everybody. And they'll be speaking on the subject of driving the digital-first enterprise with AI and machine learning. There's a big intro that I have here, but I think I'll just leave it to your moderator to lead you through this discussion.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to see everyone. We were just discussing.
Just one moment. Just a reminder for the panelists on stage. Please only use your own microphone. Don't share microphones as much as we like each other. We have a gentleman in the audience whose job is to rap our knuckles every time we do something like that, just to remind people like that. Also, there's a QR code at the table to interact with the session at pigeon.at. Use the QR code to submit your questions throughout, and I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I get a chance to say thank you again for CIO Academy for inviting us all here, and to all of you for being here, and for those of you who are on the online as well. I think we were just discussing, it's amazing that we're doing this after a couple of years. There's so much hunger for interaction and for learning from each other. So really appreciate that we're able to do this, and I hope we can continue to do it as well. So great topic, and we have a fabulous panel here, actually. Which is composed of three of us from the industry and very different three businesses, and we'll bring out the differences and how they're leveraging AI and data and technology there, and also a couple of providers from the industry who are helping companies build up their data, AI, and machine learning capabilities. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation in that sense. So let me first, what I'd love to do is get a few examples of how AI, machine learning, et cetera, is making a difference in some businesses. And like I mentioned, three very different businesses. We got Siew from DBS, which is literally a large volume, do whatever it takes to achieve higher revenue growth and improve efficiencies, like we were talking earlier. Whereas Abhishek comes from the manufacturing and kind of real land and growth kind of businesses. Very different. It's more supply chain and more operations focused, but some very interesting use cases. And then Celine here is, although from the banking sector, but private banking, where it's not a game of high volumes, but the situation is very bespoke, very unique and different kinds of analytics that's needed. So we'd love to bring out some use cases from all three industries. So Siew, perhaps if you could share with us, what are the most exciting use cases you're seeing today?
Yeah, sure. Can you see me?
No, just maybe no, just maybe hold it for a couple of seconds.
I thought that's what he said down the road. Love to, but on.
So maybe while we're doing that, perhaps Abhishek, do you want to talk about some of the exciting use cases in your business?
Sure, Arvind. So, like you mentioned, I think we are from more traditional industries, manufacturing. We have a lot of factories. We are vertically integrated, so we also grow our raw material. So we are in the pulp, paper, and palm oil business primarily. So we also have huge plantations in Indonesia and Brazil. So I think where AI comes very useful for us is in the area of plantation, it's more about precision forestry. And we use a lot of computer vision there to manage our large volume of plantations remotely. And of course, in the area of manufacturing. It's more about creating those smart factories. So here, of course, our AI is also augmented with things like IoT, the industrial Internet of Things, and collection of data from different sensors to kind of do connected manufacturing. And like you rightfully mentioned, of course, that then ties back to the supply chain side of things. So you are not doing manufacturing at capacity, but you are doing more like manufacturing on demand, right? To minimize inventory and maximize throughput. So I think for us, those are three very, very prominent areas of application of AI, computer vision, and data analytics, which is precision forestry, smart factory, and smart logistics.
Precision forestry, that sounds really interesting. Would love to go deeper into that. But Siew, if your mic's working.
Can I try? Yep,
Yeah,
works
all right,
now.
sounds good.
Okay, so great. So I think, in the last 1.5 years, we have seen an explosion of adoption of digital. And, with the more data that we have received from all our client interaction, actually we can, one of the things we did was to look at how we can democratize the financial advisory to the mass market rather than, enabling only a select few private banking customers to have the privilege of financial advisory. So actually we launched a product called the NAV Planner, which is our aim to democratize the access of investment advisory to every person in the world, rather than just the select few. So this product actually has a heavy use of machine learning to ensure that we help our customer to look at matching their investment appetite based on their activities online, for example. And throughout the whole 18 months, we have seen a lot of great insights that were derived from the machine learning tools that we have deployed. In that, actually, we help our customer to uncover their blind spot. For example, if you tag yourself as a low risk appetite in terms of investment, but actually from your online activity, we can see that, in fact, you are having a higher risk appetite. So, we actually help to advise the customer on this, so that we can provide better investment advisory. So that is, one of our, I think, very important ambition to ensure that every single person can have investment advisory. So that's one. Second one is actually, again, we have seen explosion of the digital fraud. So making sure that our customer is protected is also another very important objective. And we started to use behavioral biometrics that, again, is using machine learning models that we have created. And that has actually helped to safeguard many of our customers from being defrauded by a lot of these imposters. Yeah.
That's terrific. We'll dig into these as well a bit more. Celine, tell us about the use cases in your business.
Well, I think one of the aspects where AI and machine learning is heavily used in private banking space is really on how to use data to be able to comply with the multiple global regulation when it comes to anti-money laundering, customer insider trading, right? Due to the complexity of the setup of our customer base, right? Like usually one customer has about 12 accounts with different legal entities, different, joint account with various people or business partners. So it's kind of a complex graph structure that you have of your customer, and to which you need to overlay the overall transaction, the news, whenever you have like customers that are part of politically exposed people, right? And then follow up with the various, requirement of regulators in Dubai and, whatever, China, that are coming up, and where we need data to be at the tip of our compliance and risk team to be able to, ensure that we comply with all the various regulation and requests for all the regulators. So we've been heavily also investing in those aspects in order to ensure a proper compliance, but also being able to predict and detect, anomaly behavior of transaction, for example.
Sounds great. Thank you. Elaine, from your perspective, as you work with clients, what are some really interesting use cases you're seeing your clients use?
Yeah, so thanks, Arvind. So we have seen definitely a lot of different use cases from different industries, whether it's financials, like, over here, we have Choo, Celine, from the banks, and we have manufacturing customers as well. So but the thing that we see apart from the very interesting use cases that you leverage, whether it's for cost optimization, to get better customer experience, the fundamental what we hear from our customers is that data is the core, right? Like what Celine mentioned, data is a core to AI and ML. And a lot of times to do the data science work, the data scientists actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out where are the data, to ingest all the data, to find the best way to cleanse the data. And that itself costs at least 80%. So one of our logistics customer, warehousing customer as well. So what they did is that the data science team actually spent 80% of the time to ingest, cleanse, and get the data that they need. And only 20% on doing the actual data science work that would benefit the business. So this is a very interesting that we see. And now a lot of people are moving back to see how can data help them, to actually be the one that actually drives the fastest way to get the data and to then add value to the business with the data science intelligence. Yeah.
Thanks. We were just, Celine and I were talking about exactly this point, and we'd love to go deeper into this, which is how do you shift the balance of spending most of your time in trying to get to the data versus actually analyzing it? So we'd love to go deeper into this. Chungo, from your perspective, as you work with your customers, and you're offering a relatively new capability in the market as well. What are the use cases people are putting, for example, graph database to?
Thank you for asking that question. So as you guys may not know, graph database is actually not a new technology by any means. The science around that's been around probably close to 100 years in terms of the math behind it, right? What Tiger Graph has done is basically taken into the forefront of leveraging software to basically do that computational work to derive the actual results from, for example, graph theories and graph mathematics itself there. So what we have done is actually taken this into the market and be able to help customers, and these customers literally range from pretty much almost every industry, from banking to supply chain as well, to be able to do several key factors. One is taking that data that you guys have today, the customers have. So just to want to set the actual expectation, today's data world itself, we're obviously getting more and more data. But it's more and more of the same data itself there. It's not like all of a sudden you have some unique data that you've never seen before. It's like a new rare element that just showed up, and now you have to figure out how to leverage it, right? So for the last 10, 15 years, everybody in this industry has been on this data journey to be able to say, hey, we're collecting data, we're collecting that, we're building this data lake, that's great, and it's really the same data. We've matured in many of our ways to address technology by applying AI, machine learning, and to that level, most of the models are quite mature itself there. But as you guys may or may not know, we're actually hitting a plateau in terms of being able to find more insights. And this is where Graph is coming in. Graph is able to take that same data set that you have, what you have today, and more of it, and made to find unique insights that you don't have or have the ability to do from a relational or in general big data kind of platform itself there. And this is where Tiger Graph is being able to differentiate and to find those hidden insights, relationships, and all that. Now, let me give you a quick example. If or not the customer's using Tiger Graph is not the concern here, but every day that we're using technology, Graph is actually quite integrated into the everyday lives already. For example, you go on Google, you do a quick search on Google, the first page that comes up. That's actually a graph result output from that. You go on LinkedIn and check, then somebody says, hey, do you know this person? That's actually a graph kind of connection that you're doing from the back end that LinkedIn is doing to provide you with that connection. Facebook doing the same thing as well. Any recommendations that you see, like for example, you go on Netflix and then they give you all the recommendations of the movies and preferences. Again, that's actually a graph problem. Right? Optimization of supply chain, you go on Google trying to find your way to this hotel. Again, a graph problem itself there. So it's quite already integrated into your everyday lives as well. So hopefully that helps you in that context there.
Thanks, that's terrific. Now, let me do a very quick round with everyone. Oftentimes, people use the word AI, machine learning, as a buzzword, right? Clearly, from the examples that you brought out, it's making real impact. What is the one thing you do when you talk with your business leaders, your key partners on the table, to make sure that the focus stays on the real value of what this can do and not the buzzwords. Just in 30 seconds, if you could share that. Anyone can start, and then we can go around.
If I can start, I think that, a lot of time people see data science as something magic that will solve a problem. Yeah, we can predict things, we can give, scoring and recommendation, but how will you act on it, right? So, I mean, if there is no action behind, right? If there is no, campaign, if it's fully digital, in our case, it's more still linked to, advisory and relationship manager doing something. We can predict whatever you want. Like, it will not have any business impact. So we ensure that before we take up a project, first we size the impact, but second of all, there is also a parallel stream that is looking at the implementation of the recommendation, right? Because, yeah, again, you can give scoring and recommendation. If no one acts upon them, then nothing's going to happen.
Focusing the outcome, the business impact,
the operating model
Yeah.
behind, right? Like operating model on how do you actually deliver the value end to end and not stop at the prediction.
And sustain
Because
it.
data scientists will not go and sell your financial product to your customer, right? So we
Right.
need to be aware of that. There's still a last mile that need to be clearly defined. And a lot of time it does require operational change because we're moving from a reactive way of doing things to a predictive way of doing things. So it's not always the same skill set, it's not always the same people, that are required to kind of take the action. So that the organization need to adapt to be able to leverage on the data-driven insight.
It is a different operating model. Totally agree. Anyone else? Any perspective, Siew?
I think you have to start with the problem. What is the problem you are trying to resolve? And then you can determine whether the data and AI is the best way to solve that problem. So it should not be a solution looking for a problem. Mm-hmm. If you start from the problem and be very clear about that, I think you go down the right direction.
Super. Any other perspectives on that?
Maybe I can add slightly different perspective here. Of course, for us, like I mentioned earlier, computer vision tends to play a big part in this. To your question, Arvind, I think the thing from taking it from a buzzword to real business application, the key differentiator of the technology is creating new capability, things which perhaps in the past would have been rather difficult, if not impossible. So for us, for example, if we are managing, say, 100,000 hectares of plantation, it takes a lot of manpower to keep an eye on each and every tree's health, growth, and whether that tree has been in some way improperly handled by either large animals or even human beings, right? So I think that in the past has been a very, very difficult task. By creating a new capability using computer vision, we can now really do it in near real time. You fly the drone, you look at the pictures, you run the algorithm on the pictures to see where the chlorophyll content is off, where the, what we call the vegetation index is off, and then you start to zoom into those problems. And you do it much faster today than you could have done, say, 2 years ago. And that becomes a very, very critical business differentiator because that's your response time.
And that's a really interesting one because you would expect that the business leaders who are involved in that conversation who are not super familiar with what, say, AI or machine learning can do, what does it take to get them to try it out for the first time? And were there any interesting experiences from that you would want to share?
Sure, Arvind. I think in our company, what we like to do is work towards proof of first value. So I think traditionally we've all used POCs to check whether a technology works or not. But here, because we are really traditional industries, it really comes down to dollar and cents, whether you're making new money or you're saving some money or you're eliminating some risk for the group. So in that sense, that ability to define that proof of first value in an end-to-end way from a business perspective, I think that really is the so-called key to success. Now, from an individual capability perspective, the kind of burden that puts on the technology team or the digital team is they have to think more like entrepreneurs. So now you don't have people who are writing algorithms anymore, but you are now looking for people who look at a business problem and then they say, I can solve this using technology and I can do it really fast. And if you give me $25,000 today, I will show you how it works in the next 2 months. and in the real life scenario, not in a so-called lab sense or theoretical sense. I think that kind of promotion of entrepreneurial behavior among the execution team on the digital side as well as the business side, that kind of also allows us to get the buy-in from the business stakeholders. Because if you ask a business leader to invest $500,000 into creating an end-to-end digital platform on cloud to do everything, that is a much longer conversation. But if you focus on a proof of first value, you say just $25,000, we just do maybe 1 hectare, and I will give you a solution which works on the ground in 2 months. That's a much easier and more palatable conversation to have.
Yeah, that's a great example. And we were talking, some of us earlier, about one of the most important, of course, there's a lot of technology challenges in this, and we'll go deep into that. There are challenges with building the right talent. We'll go into that. But almost like one of the first things is Celine, you and I were talking about creating a culture, a data-driven culture. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What was it? What did it take to make that change happen?
Yes, I think one of the main things to become a data-driven organization is to really have the right level of skill set and to democratize data and analytic within the whole organization, right? So if I can take the example of Bank of Singapore, who have implemented a hub and spoke approach, which means that I run the hub, right? I'm the chief data officer. I have a central team of data scientists, data engineer, data analyst, all the data governance topic as well. But then each of the department and even the smaller team, right, have their own data analytics team, right? And so we are also looking at, now we only hire people with Python skill set, right? Originally, I mean, the nature of the business is in private banking, we don't have that many transactions and we don't have that many customers, but they are very complex, again, as I was saying, right? When you invest 3 million, 5 million into a product, right, that you want the product to be customized to your need, right? So we are kind of customizing our offering to our customer nearly. So this, in order to be able to kind of follow up, everyone in the organization needs to have access to data. And not only data scientists, right? I have a lot of analysts. I have risk analysts that are looking at, are we not too exposed? I have product analysts, investment counselor that are looking at the data to be able to do recommendation, financial analysts, compliance analysts that are looking at the AML trends, right? So all of those people need to get access to clean, common, understandable set of data that they can generate insight, right? Because they're currently spending 70% of their time trying to access the data, clean the data, understand the data, right? So if we can kind of pull those ground on a, common ground, and then after grant access to the people on a governed basis, I think too many times, people are afraid between data access and data security, right? They think that not granting access will make the data more secure. Not granting access just make the data not valuable. That's the only thing that it does. So there is an overall awareness, right? And we have a massive upskilling roadmap where we have trained, 100 people certified in Python this year. So we're upskilling the overall organization in programming, Python programming, how to leverage library, how to leverage, open source available library, for example, visualization, right? Like visualize your data properly, and then data storytelling, right? It's not only good to be able to get insight, you need to be able to combine that with what the business wants, right? About, asking the right question and getting the right insight. So all the people from the business are being trained, and they will be migrating their legacy VBA, macro, whatever, running on their own computer to a common Python environment that will be actually leveraging on best practice agile, coming from DevOps, right? So we share code, we do code peer review, everything is actually stored on a Bitbucket or GitHub environment where it's available to everyone. So apart from not spending 70% of their time accessing, cleaning, and, we're going to cut down on the doubling of the tasks that were done by each analyst, right? So we have about 75 of them in the organization. Each of them are trying to access the same set of data, cleaning it, and then sometimes it's also dangerous because they're defining their own metric on their own that is running on their own computer. No one has actually governance on how do you define that metric? How do you actually aggregate those data in order to derive that metric? And then there's a kind of misunderstanding at higher, probably management level when I don't know why here I have 1.2 and 1.6 and 1.8, and then the whole meeting, half of the meeting is to try to understand why it's 1.2, 1.6, and 1.8. It's just because it's been aggregated differently. The timeliness of the data has been different, so the output is different, right? Like that's normal. So let's try to focus on those foundations, because when those foundations are good, then we can start working on more fancier, predictive and recommendation use cases. But this is the basis. Today, people in a lot of organizations are just struggling to get access to clean and understandable data.
Thanks, Celine. That's a really important place to start with is that Siew, I'd love to get your perspective on actually all three elements of the key challenges in this case. So tell us a bit about this, how have you created the culture of data and insights at DBS? That's one. The second one I'd love to hear your perspective on is what were some of the technology challenges as well, right? And third, very importantly, I've been personally very inspired by the way you've built a talent pool and you've driven and you've really created an environment where more women are coming into data and analytics now. Would love to hear these three elements from you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Arvind. So, all of you know that the financial industry is not the most relaxed industry because it's highly regulated. The data security is extremely important. But, we also have lofty ambition to make sure that the time to data and time to insight is as little as possible. So we actually set out in 2018 to come up with a process, platform, and actually training for our people to look at how we can significantly reduce the time to data and insights, to democratize the use of data and AI by everybody in the bank, whether it is the business or the support units. And we actually set about building a platform that embed in this architecture a concept of data and AI platform as a service, right? This platform actually is largely open source and it integrates all the components that you need, whether it is the data ingestion, the compute, the security, the storage, the modeling that you need to do, and the deployment. So this was a very ambitious program because it has never been done before in the bank. But so actually, today I'm very proud to say that this platform has been used by over 4,000 data people in the bank. Across all the spectrum of our businesses, as well as our risk management unit, compliance, and so on and so forth. And in the process to get there, actually, apart from the technology itself, the platform, which is not the most difficult one, because actually solutions are out there. We have the architect who are able to integrate the things properly. I think the most challenging part was actually the education part. Of every single person in the bank of, firstly, what are the right use cases for ML? And then why we need to use this platform rather than, all the tools and whatever that they already have in their organization, in their own department, right? Because why we decided to do it this way was because we believe that, if we can have a single source of truth and actually all the right tools, the best-in-class tools set up for everybody, with the security already engineered within the architecture of the platform, as well as the non-functional capabilities, all engineered. Then the business people and the technology that's supporting the businesses just need to bring the logic, the business logic, and implement your use cases. You don't need to go and experiment with all sorts of tools for your use cases, because this platform will give you all those tools already. So that was the vision, and it was not well understood at the beginning. We spent about more than 1 year to educate everybody. And I'm very glad to say after 3 years, this is the platform is now actually widely used across the entire bank and used for many mission critical use cases. So that was how we solved our problem of how to make the AI and data available and with the right data quality. So the bringing in of people to actually create the platform, educate the others, we have to search far and wide. And we have to be very open about what kind of experience the people should have. And I think first thing in my mind is that we should create as diverse a team as possible, because that's where you can get the best solution and creative solution. So we onboarded people from technology companies, gaming companies, and all sorts of companies except banks, because we already have a lot of people with the banking experience, so we didn't quite look at people from banking, because we already have a full team of that to work with this team. So that was how we went about actually building the team, which was actually a combination of external talent that we didn't have and internal resources who are very well versed with the financial markets already.
Thanks. It's been very inspiring, Siew, seeing the way you're focusing on talent. I think that's really, really important piece of this puzzle. Elaine, a question for you. I think some of us talked about this challenge to stop fighting with the data and just allow analysts to get to the insights. What are some trends and possibilities you see to make that easier, and at the same time solve a lot of the other problems around regulations and compliance, et cetera, in bringing the data, making the data available to the business to get insights out of it?
Sure, Arvind. So I think all of us here are very familiar with the concept of aggregating all data into a data store, like building a data warehouse or building a data lake, right, to store all the unstructured data, or basically just do your data warehouse as run out of space and you create a data lake. Now, this is all about aggregating, and you have to create another copy of the data when all your data remains in your sources. So why do we still have to replicate and create another copy of the data? And this is actually not a real-time data. The data will be still. For example, if you do an ETL into a data warehouse, the data will be what you have done yesterday. So it's yesterday's data. Is it good for real-time predictive analytics? It's not. So what we see is that why not have an easier way whereby we already have all our data sources, data remains there, we just connect, so have a platform to connect to all of these data sources, and make it easy for users to discover data. We talk a lot about data democratization, and that means really making it easy for everybody in the organization, with the banks, in the manufacturing company, to assess the data and make sense of the data and be citizen data scientists. So that's something that, has to be something discoverable. But of course, it seems like we are opening a floodgate, right, for everyone in the organization to be able to access the data. And I think that raises a concern with a lot of, organizations, because that means that, does it mean that everybody can see PII information? It's not true, right? So, and especially with regulatories like PDPA or GDPR, it's very important to ensure that the data that is even surface out to these users are actually secured and governed. So for whoever that assesses it, we need to know where he is from, which department is from, what he or she can see, and then we deliver that data. But whatever this data set that we have built could be something that is shared across. For example, customer data within an organization. It should be available to different departments when they want to actually build their predictive analytics or better understand the customer, right? At the same time, we should be able to not allow different people with different roles that are more junior to actually see the actual data, for example, NRIC number. So that's one thing that, it has to be governed as well. Another aspect to it is that, people, right, is skill set. It's also very hard to get skill sets where you have to introduce new technology and have new people to be trained on that. So what we see is that whether you're a data scientist, you're happy with your Python, or you are using a visualization tool, or you're just simply an Excel expert, you should just connect to one single place and get whatever you want without having to actually, have the data being replicated. So that's one aspect. And especially in the area of, companies that are in banks or in any other organizations that have geographically distributed setup, you have subsidiaries in different countries. There's one thing that we see very common is about this GDPR requirements, whereby data cannot, some of the countries have data sovereignty issues, whereby data cannot be physically moved out of the country. And what this means is that as a company, which I'm headquartered here, for example, I need to see how, whether it's a fraud detection, to see how my customers are doing. I need to be able to get the data across all these different countries, and that is a limitation. But the fact that if you're not replicating the data, and your data is just being connected, abstracted out, then that gives you the ability to still have that view of the customer, whether it's for fraud or for, customer optimization, you still get the benefit of it. So these are some areas that, we see the abstraction or logical data fabric do help in this aspect of data democratization.
Yeah, I think virtualization is a very interesting, powerful one. And let me just check from the end user side, have you had any experiences with virtualization? Could be with the Denodo platform or some others? Any experiences do you want to share?
I think the data virtualization is a key part of many, any data platform, because, the ability to be able to access the data from anywhere is a key asset for any data platform. So definitely that is in the architecture of, the platform. Yeah.
All right. Now, Choo, you talked and you explained very well, rightfully, that graph as a theory has been around, but now it's especially as social networks happened, the Google and Facebook, the examples you took, is what really brought this to the forefront. And there's a lot happening on the graph front. Let me also from you, but also from the panel here, if there are examples that you're seeing where you're putting that to graph kind of technologies to better use, especially to get insights like that. If you want to start with that, Choo, a little bit, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question and opportunity here. So let me put into two contexts, since we have two wonderful industries represented on the panel here from FSI and also supply chain. I'll focus on those two particular areas to talk through it. So from a financial industry, I think overall graph technology has actually been pretty well proven in that industry, at least in the last few years. In fact, I say that in very much confidence. 8 of the largest banks in the world already use TigerGraph to solve some of the key challenges in several areas: fraud, AML specifically, and also helping them understand their customers, such as KYC, et cetera. Now, how do they do that? Well, if you take, traditionally speaking, from data from a relational database or even Hadoop, it's still a very well-structured kind of tablet database construct itself there, right? The challenge and the limitation around taking data from that platform and even doing what we have today in the best machine learning models or AI models applied to it, you get to a limitation where you cannot physically join those tables and those transactions to find those hidden deeper insights of where the fraud is happening. So for example, let me walk you through a very simple case, right? So you, there's a single user that is paying a transaction or doing a particular transaction, but come to find out 6 relationships deep into that transaction, there was an actual fraud that happened with one of that relationship out there. Okay, why is it 6? It could be 6, it could be 10 levels deep. So how do you find that insight from a traditional type of data set? You really can't, because are you going to join that table for transaction once, do it twice, do it 5 times? Well, how do you know? Well, that's where graph differentiates itself, because the data, once you put it in graph form itself, it's already joined. It's a matter of finding all the paths associated with that. So how does that come into practice? So I just basically told you how to find fraud, right? Now, what about anti-money laundering, right? How do you find these people that are using the system? As you guys mentioned, APIs in financial banking is so mature now, it's so readily available. It's easy for somebody to run an API to transfer money, right? So what if that person takes that API and breaks down that money down to, from $1 million down to thousands of dollars, and then transfer it? So that's over 10,000 different transactions. How do you catch somebody trying to funnel money with using technology like that that's available to them, to everybody else? They have an equal playing field as well, right? And be able to catch them and find these rings of fraud, or these people are trying to basically launder money in that sense as well. Now, what if tomorrow United States or some other country has say, hey, we add somebody new to the sanction list? Well, how do you know if you're transferring money that is somehow related to a sanctioned company or an entity itself, right? And that's where graph has the ability and the insight to quickly go deep into each of the relationship and be able to find out, oh, by the way, you transfer to somebody, that person's wife is actually belonging to a very, a PEP, what they call it, a very important person that is related to the sanctioned, entity itself there. And that's kind of where the hidden elements of where graph comes in to be able to do that. Now, let me switch over, with Abhishek here in supply chain. So it's a very, very much supply chain modeling, trying to find the best optimized way of controlling your suppliers down to the parts, down to the actual end product. that truly is a graph problem itself there, right? So if you think of it even of a bigger, more of a economic kind of impact. So I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was last year, Evergreen, that big ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. So how can we actually figure out all the entire impact of that one ship just stuck right there, and the amount of time it was stuck, and it actually rippled the entire supply chain globally as well, right? And that's exactly why I took it to a bigger scale, but that's exactly the same problem that you're trying to solve. From within your organization, you basically can use graph to truly, and in as near real time as you want, to be able to identify if there's a supplier that has a risk, what is the rippling effect across the entire supply chain itself there? And that's the power of graph.
Thank you. Any experiences from the industry on leveraging graph? Would love to hear.
Yeah, again, I mean, on all the AML use cases, I mean, all the use cases that you just mentioned, this is how we are using graph technology to be able to check on the various transaction and their provenance, and especially monitor, as we were just saying, right, the change of regulation, the sanction list of, you know, various countries, right? How does that actually affect our portfolio customer and transaction? Yeah, very well used.
Siew, you were going to say something as well, yeah?
I think similar. I think Zhang has mentioned all the typical use cases, AML, KYC, and so on.
Sounds great.
For us, I think we have a slightly different use case as well. Again, on the plantation side, we do what we call the genetic mapping of the trees. And I think for that, we also use graph database.
Okay. Brilliant. So really good stuff. Now, I know we have just a few minutes left. What I was thinking, do a kind of quick round on, I think clearly what has come out is that all of you in your own ways have taken your businesses on a journey and transformed them very significantly, right? What would you, if you could go back 5 years and you were in the early stages of the change that you're trying to make, what is the one thing you would advise yourself to make a bigger impact, to accelerate the change, to achieve this culture of data even faster? Again, let you think, and anyone who's ready, we can start popcorn style.
Get COVID 5 years ago? No.
I would say that when you are doing something truly transformational, you have to be very patient. You have to have all the grit and staying power, and you mustn't give up halfway, because actually typically big change only really happen after a lot of repeated message. If you try to tell people, okay, this is the data platform as a service, and then you explain why you should do it this way, you may think that the people understand, but if you don't repeat it 20 times over 18 months, it doesn't stick. So yeah, you need to repeat the same message over and over again, and I think one fine day it will stick, and everybody will really understand it, and they will really embrace the power of what is being created.
Totally agree. Terrific point. Please, anyone?
I think one stat I always like to give, right, that I think it's coming from a report of McKinsey or something on any successful transformation, right? It's usually 20% about the tech stack, right? So the platform that is implemented and the capabilities. 50% about the people, and in the people we think about skill set, having the right people at the right place in the organization, operating model. How do you reskill your people for them to be ready? So this whole, digital mindset, and so looking at the people where their task will be automated in the future. What do we do with them, right? How do we help them, right? It's our role as company. And then 30% is about the process re-engineering. From having a reactive process to a more proactive and predictive processes, right? But processes are defined by people. So if you don't get the people to understand, the process won't change. So when you look at your digital transformation, 80% is actually on the change of people and mindset, and 20% is thanks to technology enablement.
Totally agree. People, process, technology, in that order, actually, right? Any others?
I think, Arvind, the other thing which I would like to add is the size of your ambition. I think if I could go back 5 years ago and correct myself, I think I would be a little bit more ambitious. Inherently, I think as people, we are always a little bit, for lack of a better word, a bit scared to aim big. because we have that fear of failure, of falling short, and then not living up to the expectations of people around us. Being in the transformation business, that is part of your life. You will inherently fail, and you may even fail frequently, not sometimes, right? But I think what I could do better if I had to restart 5 years ago was to aim slightly bigger, because what I learned over the last 5 years is once people have your trust, or you have the trust of the people, they are a bit more forgiving. And then it really questions, or rather the question becomes, how big was your ambition to begin with? Because people, at the end of the day, any organization is about people. They are there to work with you. You are there to work with them. You are helping their business become more profitable, more successful. And if you have their trust, I think people like us who are in the industry of bringing change and transformation, we can afford to be a little bit more ambitious.
It's great. Elaine?
Yeah, so I think, from a data transformation perspective, what I see that in retrospectively is that organizations should look more into, what do I have today? Do I really need to actually, build another, storage of what I have? Or can I just look at what I have? Am I easily able to connect to all of them easily? Am I able to, easily allow different consumers to actually connect to this platform to get the data? So it's really the ease of access and how do I actually expedite and the speed of agility to do that. So I think that's very important because we have all been very much into the mindset of we have to, before we do any analytics or ML or machine learning, we need to really have all the data replicated, and replicated to different times. And also the fact that, the governance and security part of things, we also are worried that, if I were to actually have the same data for everyone, they would be actually, worried. So we start building different data marts. So we are seeing a lot of sprouting of different data sources, and then we lose control. So if you want to control, it's really to have a single layer to assess it, and then from there, we govern and deliver and provide the data out.
Yeah. Thank you. Choo, any last comments there?
Well, as a technology provider, it's a little bit different, right? So from our perspective, it's tough to say what could I have recommended 5 years ago. What I could tell you now is that I wish that we had this technology 5 years ago, to be honest, because you would have had, an increasing amount of insight to help the world and help companies to, be better at what they're doing. It really is at the point. So, sorry, I don't have any other.
No, that's actually great, and I'm seeing a terrific pattern here. So think big, right? Grit and perseverance. Think about holistically with people, process, and technology. Make it easy for your folks. Remove the barriers. I think Robin said that earlier today as well. And then imagine the future is here already, right? And that allows you to think even bigger. So terrific. Thank you so much. Really, really great insights. Great talking to you all, and thank you, everyone. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to. There were a couple of questions that I noted here, but I think we won't have the time to cover those. So please catch us later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much indeed.